4-5. Today we're going to be talking about fractions and decimals. We're going to be talking about different types of fractions, different types of decimals, and going from fractions to decimals and from decimals to fractions. So we're working with them in several different ways. So we need to know a few terms first. The first term that I want to talk about is a terminating decimal. A terminating decimal is a decimal that terminates or ends. So it's kind of in the phrasing of it, it kind of tells you what it is anyways. So basically it's a decimal that ends. Decimals like 0.35 or 35 hundredths, or 0.5 or 5 tenths, or 25 thousandths. So those are different decimals that they end. They don't go on forever. On the other hand, a repeating decimal are decimals with distinct patterns and they repeat forever. And now, in order to show that a number is repeating, we don't want to just do 0.3333333, we just keep writing it forever. We have to have some sort of notation that we use to show this is going on forever without actually showing that it's going on forever. So we use that, we use a bar notation to help us with that. Basically, a bar notation is whatever number or numbers that repeat, you just put a line over those numbers that go on forever. Sometimes it's just one number that goes on forever, like 0.3 repeating. That would be shown by putting the bar over the 3, that the 3 goes on forever. This is 0.12, or it says that the 12 goes on forever. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So both the 1 and the 2 in that order repeat forever. And then in this decimal, it has 11.385. The only numbers that are repeating are 8, 5, because those are the only numbers with the bar above it. So it's not 385, 385, 385. It's 385, 85, 85, 85, on and on and on forever. Okay? So now let's go ahead and talk about how do we go from decimals to fractions. Now we do this in a few steps. First of all, if we had the fraction 55 hundredths, the first thing we would do is say it. 55 hundredths. We put it in word form. Because when we say it in word form, we are talking about the place value and we're talking about the numbers. So that kind of tells us what our fraction is going to look like. So if this decimal is 55 hundredths, we would write it as 55 over 100. You can also think of it as you have to move the decimal 2 spaces, so you have to have 2 zeros by the 1. You can think of it that way as well. But basically, if you read the decimal, it will tell you what the fraction should look like. So 55 hundredths, and then the last step, you simplify it. So the first step is to say it in word form. Second step, put that word form in fraction form, and then the last step is to simplify. So since 55 and 100 both share a 5, we're going to take it out and make it 11 over 20 instead. So that's in the simplest form possible. Now, let's go ahead and take some notes on how to go from fractions to decimals. Alright, our notes are continuing a little bit more because we ran out of room, but basically now we're going to talk about how to go from fractions to decimals. Alright, so there are two different ways that you could do this. The first way is by making some sort of 10 on the bottom, either making a 10, 100, or 1,000. So if you can change this denominator to something that's closest to it, in this case 100 is the next 10 that you can go up to. So you could think, okay, in order to get from 20 to 100, we have to multiply by 5. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to the numerator as well. And now I have 35 hundredths. Now the reason why we do that is because when you read 35 hundredths, it tells you exactly what the fraction or decimal looks like. 35 hundredths. So basically you write a 35 and the 35 ends in the hundredths place. So that is one way to do it. So make some sort of 10 at the bottom. Basically you're making the place value, the next place value for this. So since this is ending in the hundredths place, you would have 100 in the denominator. So that's way one. The next way you could do it is by dividing the numerator by the denominator. So basically you flip it to the side and start dividing it. So if you would divide 20 into this, you would have to add a decimal because 20 does not go into 7, and so on and so forth, and you'll figure out that your decimal is 35 hundredths. So it doesn't matter which way you do it. Sometimes one is easier than the other, you know, and sometimes vice versa. So basically play around with it and see which way you like the best. Alright, let's do a few examples. Alright, my first one, first fraction is 2/5. Now I'm going to go ahead and change 2/5 into the decimal form. Now I can use this form or I can use this form. And I'm going to go ahead and use this one since 5 is close to 10 and I could have the tenths in the denominator, which will tell me what place value my number will go in. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to want to go ahead and make a 10. Some sort of 10. It could be 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000s, anything that goes with the decimal place values. So this would be the first decimal place value. So in order to get to 10, I'd have to multiply by 2. And if I do that to the denominator, I have to do that to the numerator as well, to keep it proportional, the times 2. So then 2 times 2 would give me 4. So my decimal is going to be 4/10. So I'm going to write a 4, and it ends in the tenths place. So my decimal is 0.4, or 4/10. Alright, number 2, this time is a little bit different because I have a mixed number. So that means I have a whole number and a decimal together. So I'm going to think about it. Alright, 7. That means that 7 is my whole number. Now what is going to be in the decimal place? Now, 1/2 is one a lot of people commit to memory, which is good because it'll be quick for you because you're going to run into 1/2 tons of times. So 1/2 is 0.5 of the decimal. So that means that it's 7.5 is your decimal. Alright, let's go ahead and look at number 3. Number 3 is 5/9. Now this time, it's not very easy to make the denominator a 10. So I'm going to go ahead and do this form. I'm going to divide. So I have to divide my numerator by my denominator. So can 9 go into 5? No. So I'm going to have to put a 0, and I'm going to have to pull a place value, a decimal. So now how many times does 9 go into 50? Now the closest you could get is 9 times 5, which gives you 45, and then you would subtract and get 5. Then you add a 0, then you go down. How many times does 9 go into 50? The closest is 5, which gives you 45, and you're going to get 5. Now we start seeing a pattern here because we keep getting 50, 50, 50, and 50. So basically, we're going to have a 0.5 repeating. So this is an example of when you run into a repeating decimal. It'll just keep going and keep going and keep going. Basically, you can't get anywhere. You're not getting anything accomplished. The 5 is just going on forever. So 5/9, the decimal form is 0.5 repeating. Now I'm going to go ahead and use bar notation to make it quicker and easier to show that it goes on forever. And I only put the line above a 5 because the 5 is the only number that's going on forever. Alright, down here I have a decimal, and I'm going to want to change this decimal to a fraction. So first thing, remember the first step is to read the decimal. So this is 22 hundredths. So I read it. Now I'm going to go ahead and write it in fraction form. 22 hundredths. Okay, my last step is to simplify. So first put it in word form, put it in fraction form, then simplify. I'm going to erase this a tad so that I can have some room to work. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and simplify. Now I need to think about what goes into 22 and 100. And I'm just thinking, I'm just going to take a 2 out right away. So I'll take a 2 out of the numerator and the denominator, and I'm going to get 11 over 50. And since 11 is prime and 11 doesn't go into 50, our fraction is simplified. So 11 over 50, 11/50 is our fraction. Alright, here we go, moving along. So let's go ahead and change this decimal into a fraction. So first things first, we need to read our fraction. So this is 4 and 6/10. So now I'm going to write my fraction. 4 and 6/10. Last step is to simplify. So I read my fraction, I put it in read my decimal, put it in fraction form, and now I'm going to simplify. Because I see that there's a number that still goes into 6 and 10, which is 2, and I'm going to go ahead and take that out. So it's still going to have a big 4 because 4 is our whole number. So we can't really simplify a whole number because it's whole. Okay, let's go ahead and simplify 6/10. So if we take a 2 out of the numerator, we're left with 3. If we take a 2 out of the denominator, we're left with 5. So this is our fraction, 4 3/5. All right, last problem, we're going to do a word problem. It says, during a hockey game, an ice resurfacer travels 75/100 miles during each ice resurfacing. What fraction represents this distance? So basically, we need to realize that we have a decimal, and they basically want us to just change it into fraction form. So it's not really making you think too hard. It's basically just putting words around the same problems that we've been doing. So basically, we're changing 75/100 into a fraction. So first things first, read the decimal. So this is 75/100. So it's 75 over 100. And now we got to go ahead and simplify. So what goes into both 75 and 100? I'm going to go ahead and break it down. I'm going to do the prime factorization. So in order to get 75, you're going to have 5 times, let's see, 75 divided by 5. It goes in 1 time, 5 minus 2. So it goes in 15 times, and then 3 times 15, or 3 times 5. So 5 times 3 times 5 is the prime factorization of 75. So now I'm going to break down 100 as well. So 100, you have 2 and 50. Then 50 can break down further in 2 and 25. And 25 can break down into 5 and 5. So our prime factorization is 2 times 2 times 5. Alright, so now we need to see what numbers do they have in common. We have a 5 here, we have a 5 here, 5 here, and a 5 here. So basically, we are sharing a 25. So I'm going to go ahead and take a 25 out of the numerator and the denominator. So basically, we're just simplifying our fraction. So once we take the biggest number they have in common out, it'll be simplified. So if I take 25 out, I'm going to be left with a 3 in the numerator. If I take 25 out of the denominator, I'm left with 4. So all of that just to say that it's 3/4. All right? Make sure you've watched this video completely from beginning to end. Make sure you've taken all your notes, including this little section up here. Now let's go ahead and do some on your own questions. Alright, you have 5 problems to do for me. These first 3 problems, you're going to go ahead and change the fractions and put it in decimal form. These last 2, you're going to go from decimal form to fraction form.